Welcome to the Sky Talk Doc podcast, where we navigate life, relationships, and everything in between with thought-provoking curiosity and a touch of grace. Buckle up, Buttercup. This is a flight you won't forget.
Good morning, Chris. I am so excited to have you back on. The response was huge about the conversation we had on peptides. Like, people are just craving this kind of knowledge. And so we had talked at the end of the last podcast that I was going to geek out with you on all things shockwave therapy and, frequency-based stuff, light-based stuff. And so here we are, and we're doing it again. And I'm so excited to have you back because this is I feel like there's so much to unpack here and people just don't really know about it yet. It's very confusing, but without further ado, I'll let you jump in.
Yeah. I'm excited to jump into this because it is such an overlooked and misunderstood topic. So people go, oh yeah, there's the red light, there's this, that, and they think it's just this separate other piece or isn't even real. And then not thinking about how all this actually works together. And that's where tremendous amount of power comes from. So if we back up a little bit and just think about what are we trying to do as a whole with our bodies in this process, right? And I think about amplifying these effects, and we need to have first up, like, okay, if you're using peptides, you're using it as a signaling molecule. That's part of a process. It is not the answer in and of itself, right? So we need to start with being able to have that signal be heard, to have this terrain. And I think we touched on that in the last podcast, but there's a lot of things from lifestyle and some of the things that we're going to talk about here that are going to help create this environment where we don't have a lot of interference, radio signal noise that's allowing that signal not to be heard. And then we've got these modalities. So then you've got the peptide therapy itself. Then you've got these modalities on top of that can amplify that. And then we also got to make sure that we've got our substrate material, like the things that we're literally going to work with. Like, hey, if I'm trying to, repair skin or joints, and you need some collagen, you need the nutrients to be able to actually that substrate to do it stuff. And then at the end of the day, like, let's not forget the big thing, like reinforcing everything with movement and load to actually build resilience and get these things to stick. So it's important, but there's also part of this when I talk about creating that terrain, that some of these effects they can help with that as well. I mean, Shockwave itself is tremendous for this. So Shockwave is an approved medical therapy for non-invasive work on helping avoid surgeries for joints. Like, it basically tells the body, it forces tissue to respond. That's what it does. That's the simplest way to describe shockwave. So it's not a theragun. So this is a much higher pulse that's going deep into that tissue in a sonic wave type fashion. And it forces that. It's really great at breaking up scar tissue. So if anyone's had, post like surgery or any number of other reasons to have that just nodule like material that's just adhered, haven't been using a muscle for a long period of time, something happened within it, like in the sports realm, it could be a bad injection or something like that. That is, something, it's just this lump, it's a knot in there, and that can stay for years. It can limit your range of motion. It binds the fascia from moving properly, which affects neurological signals, all this. So it's tremendous at doing that. And so if we think about, like, I thought I'd start with this one. It may be less fascinating from some of the signaling networks type of stuff, but it induces a mechanical stress is what Shockwave does. So it's typically a gun. It's kind of painful. If you go over an area and you dial.
No. It is a real painful. Like, oh my God, my experience with it. I have a super vasovagal response. And so literally fainting goat, I thought I was going to die. It hurt so bad. And then after I did it the first time, I found out that normally they use this for kidney stones and stuff, to break up kidney stones, which is wild to me, and also for plantar fascia as well. But I think that honestly, the particular joint was so activated, so on fire, that really just anything was so painful. So I feel like now that I've done a lot of the breaking up of the adhesions using other traditional therapies like stretching, mobility, and different things like that, as well as the unit and stuff, I think now when I go back in this week, I'm gonna request the shock therapy again because there was a point where I was like, no more. Like I am not. I hate you people. You are Guantanamo Bay. I'm never coming back. um, but that being said, I think now that everything's kind of like chilled out a little bit when I go back in, I think I'm gonna be, more receptive, more ready. But it is powerful. Like you can tell it's getting in there and doing some work. It kind of sounds like an MRI machine, like it's like making a clacking or something. I'm not sure
Yep.
exactly if there's a correlation. It seems like there must be, but
It's, well, it's interesting. So they can use so there's several different ones. The focus shockwave does not use the magnets, but the magnet itself is not doing the work, but it's driving, a device from one end of a tube to the other. So it just like there's a little,
Mhm.
piece of steel in there that it's driven and then it's sucked back via magnet, driven, sucked back. And so it's just that slamming force, clunk, 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 clunk
Yeah.
on that, which is why it's very different than like a Theragun, which is a motor driven. It just doesn't stimulate that actual shock that's going to pass through that tissue and create that mechanical that mechanical signal. And that mechanical stress causes that cellular signal. And you talked about the pain associated with it. I really kind of like using the shockwave almost as a diagnostic tool as well.
Mm.
So you can what I'll do with that is run a higher frequency, which is less painful, but kind of scan over a larger piece of tissue and
Mm.
help find where those areas are that are more painful. Because you'll discover in that process and you can it may be some of that fascia is kind of bound up in an area, some area that somebody doesn't expect. They're like, oh, okay, that's it. And then you can temper it and make it less painful. So unfortunately, the
Mhm.
clinical applications, they'll call out like, here's the frequency and here is the amount of time, where I like to vary it
Yeah.
because you can start high, which kind of starts shutting down some of the pain signals. And then as you can withstand it, now then start turning the frequency down lower, clunk, 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 clunk. And then that's where you experience more pain. But if you start there, and again, doesn't give you the opportunity to really understand what's going on, but it's a really getting kind of out of the topic, but they're reasonably cheap machines at the end of the day.
So my PT, what he would do is he would kind of move it around, and then when I stopped being able to talk and breathe, that's when he would go, "Oh, we're on it."
It's
And then he would stop it and he would say, "Tell me how long before the pain subsides." And that was kind of his measure, is how quick is your comeback to life, like recovery. And anyway, that's the system that he used, kind of in talking about how you would scan to find it.
Yeah, so very, very similar then. Yes, like, yep, now we've found the spot that we're gonna get, and then you'll feel it, you'll sit on that for a little bit, and all of a sudden it's like, okay, the pain's coming down. Now we've got
Yes.
enough to get that response. So what is that doing? That's driving growth factors, it's driving blood flow, it's driving collagen synthesis, like it's forcing the tissue to respond to this, and it's breaking that up to allow that substrate material to get in, as well as for the waste factors to clearance, because basically you've had a lack of blood flow typically in that area. It's like
Yeah.
it's it's tightened up and hasn't allowed it's in safety mode, which creates more of that issue, because then those two things stop happening. We stop you know we're shutting down the blood supply, and we stop delivering substrate material and removing waste products for those normal reactions to happen. So it starts driving that tissue remodel and starts breaking up the stagnation and basically forces the body into adaptation. But the more recent research has been really fascinating, because I have found that with use of peptides, either before or after the shockwave therapy, that you get substantially better results than peptides alone or shockwave alone.
Mm.
And so I'm thinking about it from a, an engineering perspective, because that's my background, of course. And I'm going, well, that shockwave is literally grabbing that, those compounds and taking it deeper into that tissue, getting into the nooks and crannies, which some level should be happening. Like if you put a topical penetrant on before, like it will drive that topical penetrant deeper than normal. It'll drive it into the tissue further. Like that's how shockwave therapy works. If we were going to, do a liquid onto the ground and then put a thumper on it, out and, that's it's going to drive that and allow that to permeate into that
Right.
further. So our
Right.
bodies are going to respond the same way the ground would be, if with an oil rig that's out there hitting something, right? It's the same process. But what they found is they had antibiotic resistant staff.
Oh,
And
wow. Okay.
so what they did is used the shockwave therapy and found that they were able to get the antibiotics into the cell much better. And what they discovered was that there's on the cell's membrane, there's a receptor, PX7 receptor, that the shockwave therapy is affecting. And that's temporarily increasing the permeability of that cell membrane. So they were able to drive the antibiotics into the cell and get better uptake of the antibiotics and remediate this staph infections that are normally resistant to antibiotic treatments. And reading that research, obviously it clicked right away to me going, that's why my peptides are way more effective, right? Like we've got which is again, if I do the peptides before or after, you're going to have that same effect because they're going to be in the tissue around the timing that we've enhanced the permeability of that tissue. So if I'm taking GHK, BPC 157, if I've taken something that releases IGF levels, so any of your growth hormone derivatives, or they're not actually working direct, or they impact, we might talked on this last one, impact the pancreas or impact the hypothalamus, which then impacts the pancreas, which then releases IGF-1, which is the healing component. So all of those are going to be able to pass that and deliver into that further, which they already do a great job of that to begin with, because that is one of the essential values of peptides is they're small in size. So small in size means low toxicity because there's low levels of accumulation because of that size. But it also is why they're so great at working, because they're able to get in because they're not very large, complex, full proteins going in. So you've got these short amino acid sequence that can penetrate. Then you add shockwave on top of that, and you basically opened up the tissue as well as opened up the cells themselves, both for the signal uptake.
Oh,
Now that is
wow.
really cool.
So, does it use acoustics I mean, I understand the concept of the magnet, but what's the receptor in the body, I guess would be my question.
Yeah. So the receptor, so mechanically, it's just that mechanical stimulus like
Oh,
training
okay.
is, right? Like
Okay.
we're mechanically inducing stress to the
So it's
tissue.
physical feedback. Got it. Okay.
Right. And so that is creating a lot of that. Now, the PX7 receptor in the cells that decreases the membrane or increases the membrane's permeability is the receptor that's being affected by that. So if we're talking about that receptor level, so we have two different things. We've got the mechanical nature of driving and forcing that remodeling, breaking up stagnation, creating this environment, right, where that stuff's going to happen. Shockwave stimulates because of that, blood flow. It's driving into the area, it's opening up that tissue, but it's also forcing like the angiogenesis processes, the formation
Mhm.
of those new microcapillaries. So again, going to work really well. TB4, TB500 drives angiogenesis. Well, boom, we're going to add that in there. You're going to get a duplicative of that effect from using the shockwave that is also driving some of those same factors. So it's literally like loosening up those materials. If you go on, like, this would be good. If anybody's watching this, go look up vibration and concrete.
Oh,
All right.
yeah. Yes.
So if you pour concrete and it's like this big old lumpy mess, they'll stick a little vibe rod in it. That's exactly what a shockwave is.
And then
It's
it
the
just
exact same thing. All of a sudden, it just turns into a liquid and just runs smooth and lays out everywhere, right? That's
yep,
the exact same process. That's what I'm talking about, happening, thumping the ground with like, if you've got
yep,
some liquids in it, it's just going to drive that through. It's creating that mechanical, like making everything run smooth, right? But we're also affecting it at that tissue cell signal level as well with that membrane permeability. So it's that larger level, the mechanical level, right? Of what's happening with that concrete going, all
yep.
of a sudden this scarred up, think
Mhm.
about that like lumpy big piles, like trying to push it down and smooth it out, add that little bit of vibration, boom, it just turns into, looks like water, just rolls out and lays just the way it's supposed to, looks beautiful.
And
That's
then the
that
fluid in the
mechanical
body
nature of the
can
product.
move freely. I took a myofascial workshop at one point when I was big in yoga using the Theracane tool, to like break up the
Yeah,
adhesions.
yeah.
And, they actually showed a cadaver of a man, and I hope I don't have this wrong because 'cause it's been a long time, but basically, it was an old injury to the shoulder arm area that became so adhesed or whatever, so knotted up that the blood wasn't flowing properly and ultimately caused him to have a heart attack. Is that even possible? I mean, I I might be remembering it incorrectly, but that's kind of what the gist was.
Yes, it is possible. So we have seen this, and God, I've seen it in some of the pro baseballers when I was working in that field quite a bit.
Oh,
Some of the Tommy John surgeries and stuff like that post where
yeah,
we've got
yeah.
this tissue going on, but they end up pulling out these really nasty, out of an artery, just all coagulated because this is, during the surgery that they've done this because this arm has been induced that trauma. It's lacked that blood flow. It's in this protective measurement. You've got all that going on. And those arteries just start, because they don't have that blood flow, it's not moving. Those microcapillaries aren't working, like all that stuff's not going on. And yeah, like, is that, I don't want to fearmonger here. Like, that's not the intent there, like the likelihood of that leading to it. But on occasion, like if something like that happens, you've got that big clot, somehow it gets freed up, it has the potential. Yes, that is a mechanism that happens because when
Well,
we've lacking how that body's supposed to be fluid and working, like, yeah, that is a potential outcome. And it does happen when that tissue is so locked down that it's not it's not fluid. It's not working the way. That's like this is why the number one biohack in the world is literally just strength training. Like it's going to beat poor sleep. It's going to beat poor nutrition. I know a lot of people don't want to hear this, but like, it does because it makes this organ, the organ of muscle, the organ of your lymphatic, all these other things that we are now discovering in the last decade that are actually additional organs and systemic working throughout that whole body. It makes those work. Like they're sitting stagnant. Number one
as you
biohack in
think
the world,
about
like moving some load.
yeah, I mean, I can think about how I've heard stories over the years of people that were incredibly fit, right? That suddenly dropped dead from a heart attack or something like that. You're like, "What? They ate well, they exercised? I don't get it. It doesn't make sense." That's terrifying for the rest of us. But when you realize the river that is our lymphatic system, all of the, it's like we literally are fluid. That's what we are. I was just on a podcast with Molly K. Cover, who's a naturopath that's working with peptides as well as like dry blood analysis and things. And she was like, if you're not looking at the movement of fluid within the body, you're missing the entire point, right? Like this is such
Yep.
a critical area and it doesn't take much, especially in our modern world that we live in with all of the industrial nation and et cetera, for things to get locked up and stuck and stagnant. And if you ever walk by a pond and look at what happens when water's not flowing, you can see real quickly how it becomes sludgy and yucky and all of that.
Yep. Yeah. Yeah, you could sit there and be putting all the great nutrients in there for the fish, right? You make sure that the sunlight's just perfect, do all the thing, and it's gonna look like crap if it's not running, if it's not
You're right.
flowing,
If there's
right?
not
So,
movement.
yeah, if we go back and anchor, like what we've talked about so far and everything else that we're going to cover, we're talking about like, yeah, uh, movement of the fluid, blood flow, oxygen delivery, lymphatic movement, right? So that's all one. We've got mitochondrial function or energy production. We've got inflammation. I was just going to raise my middle finger. I should keep going there. Inflammation, cellular stress, and then we've got the collagen and tissue remodeling. And then, like what's the timing and sequencing of all this? So these are like the major buckets to kind of make sure that we're hitting on within that. So yeah, with that comes in like something like red light therapy, right? Because it's really easy to jump in and talk about. I know everybody in the red light therapy realm loves to reference cytochrome C oxidase and how that affects uptakes ATP production, but the nitric oxide release that it causes, that new
Uh,
vasodilation that it's going to drive, right? That there is going to help, right? And then pair that with now your peptides that are going to further drive that vasodilation, help with the microcapillary formation in those areas that are, when I talk about that angiogenesis and that microcapillary, that's in that tissue that is all locked up that needs that to happen again to be able to heal. And then driving down the oxidative stress, which there's a lot of oxidative stress that's happened with that adhesion, if you want to say. I don't want to get too technical in like where the research actually shows us today in our thought process, but it's a great way to, yeah, that adhesion. We'll just leave it at that, right? I'm sure there'll be some people that want to
Well,
correct
I found this
that to some.
too, and it's like I try to keep things accessible for as many people as possible. Do I understand like the core workings of the neurotransmitters of the brain? Sure. But let's just call it dopamine. Let's just call it cortisol and leave all the rest off because people are like,
Exactly. I'm like, I hate the
yeah.
term core, but I'll use it all the time because, you know, uh, but yeah, at the end of the day, like what happens? Like we've got some mechanoreceptors that release some toxins basically in the signal, around them after we've got some, injury mechanism, right? That then reduces the fluidity, of those tissues at that level. And that essentially ends up creating what we call an adhesion, but you can't physically go in necessarily with a Therastick and break it, but the Therastick is going in and creating the signals that then tell those things to happen, which it basically does, break it up. But mechanically, that's not what's happening. And that's what people will get really caught up into the verbiage of it. They're like, you're completely wrong. And I'm like, well, at the end of the day, yes, it happens via a signal that then goes to the brain, then comes back and changes the tissue itself. The stick itself is not changing the tissue, but it is sending it is providing the peripheral input that does end up to the signal cascade that leads to that, right?
Well,
And
I'll tell you my
so
nighttime routine right now. I've got the TENS unit on, and then I take that off, and then I'm doing the red light therapy, and then I'm handing the Theragun to my partner who's driving that. I don't know what I'm doing, but I'm just trying all the things. So I'm happy that we're talking about this. I do think though, I was actually at a conference. It was for aerospace well, it was for manufacturing, which is a whole nother life that I have. And I walked up to this booth and they were like, NASA proved that red light, blah, blah, blah works. And so I sat down and the guy had this thing called the Perfectio X. And it was this red light tool. And ultimately he totally got me on it and I bought it. But I think it works. I don't know. I can't see. Right. Like, but I believe the science behind it. So I think that's the other part of this is all this stuff is happening deep in our tissues, deep in our lymphatic system, deep in our muscles. And we really can't see like we can a cut maybe that's healing on the surface. And I think that's where people get confused by a lot of this stuff. I can feel something's not right in my body, but I don't see the beginning and the end of these treatments that I'm using.
right. Well, the red light you can feel right away. Like if you've got an injury, like it changes the perception of pain. It basically brings down your pain right then. And you can feel like usually your red light's got some infrared with it as well. And you've
Yeah.
got that warmth that's going on. What's that warmth doing? It's creating heat, which is going to drive the blood flow. It's going to drive the vasodilation. So red light's really cool because you can feel it happening. Like if you're sore, if you're low back sore and you spend some time, a few inches from a red light panel, like you're going to feel better. Your pain's going to go down. Like those are going to happen. And then you're also going to end up finding, wow, okay, so my energy levels are a little bit better as well. That's because of some of the stuff that's happening at the cellular level, the enhancing that mitochondrial efficiency, that stuff that I talked about, improving ATP production through the effect of cytochrome C oxidase. Now, there's a really, really great study. I think I've got it in my YouTube video on this, a whole series on this topics, but it is CD34 plus, which is long and short, that is stem cells, right?
Hmm.
They exposed the tibia, just the tibia, to red light and measured that CD34 plus or stem cells in the blood, the elevation of that before and after. And it raised it by nearly three stem cells by 300%. Systematic, your whole blood, like from just the exposure of the tibia to the red light therapy.
Wow.
So, think, oh, I don't have time for that. You don't have time for 8 minutes of red light therapy in the morning. Best time to do that, by the way. So I said, you're doing the evening. If you can make sure that you're doing a morning dose as well, because our body actually responds better if we're
With
doing
the
it with the
circadian of
circadian,
the
because
sun.
there's a
Yeah.
cellular clock. Like,
I
okay,
wondered about
get one of
that.
the little red lights, put it under your desk, and pull up your pant leg. Like, it'll work. Like, it
Ah,
won't feel as good as doing it direct on some of the areas, but
yeah.
it's going to have an effect on that, which is going to enhance your healing. It's going to enhance collagen synthesis. It's going to improve that signal fidelity. Like, that's going to be amazing pairing that with GHK-Cu collagen for, skin healing, BPC 157 for repair. Like, it's going to work great with that. So red light, it improves the cell's ability to actually carry out the instructions,
Mhm,
right?
mhm.
So the shockwave, it forces the tissue to respond. The peptides are the ones guiding how to rebuild it in that process. So that's why those two work so well together, because it's getting that concrete, but like what structure, what form, how do we, what's the molds? Peptides are helping with the instructions, right? It's setting the stage for that. With your red light, it's improving that cell's ability to carry out those instructions as well.
And reducing inflammation too, right? It's also reducing inflammation in the area. That's part of that process.
Yes.
Right. So that's
Yes.
part of the vasodilation that you're talking about, is all intertwined.
Yep. So, and then we've got the PMF. So this is the pulsed electromagnetic frequency. One is still, so there was a long time where shockwave was woo woo, then red light therapy was woo woo, and now it's like, okay, this is proven, like red light therapy was on the cover of JAMA this last year. Like,
Yeah, yeah.
I still encounter people that are like, it's not proven for this or that. I'm like, you're looking at
Wake
the
up.
wrong studies, by the way.
Yeah.
And now PIMP still falls in that, like, now it's still in
Yeah,
it's woo woo if you bring that up type thing. But to me, it is so clear. And when we look at some of the research, you would go, why the hell is this not the standard of care in so many cases? Because when we're talking like bone deposition, so you think about osteoarthritis, a
yeah.
bone breakage, like, I mean, it just drives that process. Like, bone healing is a mechanical process. It is a welding process, by the way, for those that don't know. I
So
kid you
I
not. It
recently I
is,
recently did a Hokot sauna with the ozone and PMF, and oh my
yep.
god, one episode, one sitting, and I was like, "This is huge." I mean, it was a massive, massive change. So I actually signed up for the package where I'm gonna go frequently because I feel like it's something that you should probably be doing at least once a month if there's a Hokot sauna in your area.
Yeah. So the feeling from that, like, it's literally charging your battery.
Yeah,
Like, we've got this electron transport chain that is our energy production system, and it is increasing the energy
mhm,
potential across those membranes. Like,
yeah,
it's when you put your cell phone on the little charger, like, it's
yeah.
doing the same thing for you right then. Like, it is altering that membrane potential. It's
I re
improving the ion exchange. At the
Yes,
same time, it's enhancing the microcirculation.
I
So
recently
this
got
is
one
a
of
mechanical effect.
like a little wireless TENS unit, you know what I mean? I just
Yeah.
started it yesterday, so you just this one I haven't used it, I used the bigger pack, but you just, like, like that and set the electrical input. It's not going to do the ozone stuff and all of that. That's more for going to the Hokot sauna. But I mean, this thing, it's a little tiny like iPod container you can take with you anywhere. So cool.
I'll have to check those out. That's handy because with the tens, the wires always ends up being a pain in
No,
the butt
this
because then
has no
they get tangled
wires.
up, and then you're like,
I
yeah, that's
swear I
cool.
should have somebody from this company on this podcast because this thing is a freaking game changer. And they even have
Yeah.
this is the one I used yesterday, but they even have like the big one, that you can put on your low back or whatever. I just set it to 17 is just doing its little, but it's wild. I mean, I think there's so much to the electrical channels in the body that the Reiki, the old school, like they were on it, but we're just now catching up to it, I think.
Yeah, a good friend of mine, you might be interested to have him on here, Dr. Roy Page. So I don't know anybody that's done more clinical continuing ed. I know he's been learning German and Japanese because just so he can pull the research. So he
Right.
has a degree in Western medicine and a degree in acupuncture, Eastern medicine, and has done
Wow.
all the continuing eds on. So, and he, we've had so many in-depth conversations, diving deep on stuff where it's like, at the end of the day, like Chinese medicine gets a knock because, hey, where's the science behind it? And they're like, it's pattern recognition. It doesn't explain how, but here's these patterns that developed over, 5,000
Thousands
years
of
or
years.
whatever it is. And it's like, all right, if you want to dive into the science, unfortunately, a lot of the acupuncture stuff, some of the really leading stuff's like out of Germany or wherever, you can't read the research and people are like, where's the so thus, learning these other languages, but they've got this like really fascinating tool that maps like, on the ear, and they've done the research and know exactly where, and it's super, super accurate. It's crazy. So I'll tell you, this is an interesting story. So with Dr. Roy, by the way. So he's based in Beverly Hills, and I had to get my elbow surgery, and I flew down to best elbow surgeon in the world down there. It was at Curl and Job, and we did the elbow surgery. I flew back home the next day, which I'm not supposed to, but whatever. And so 2 weeks later, I had to fly back down to do my follow up. Maybe it was a week later or whatever. And I had had a splitting headache for like 3 days. And I'm like, okay, I got to go by and see doctor just to get the acupuncture side done and clear this up while I'm here. So go in, check out the elbow. He's like, wow, I've never seen anything heal like this, of course, and is, by the way, the toughest elbow he's ever seen in his life. Number one elbow surgeon in the US. Well, I've hung 1,000 pounds off of it more times than any other human's done. So,
It's
that's
crazy.
it's like, yeah, that's had some damage.
I'm
So
over here working on
I
my external rotation with 5 pounds.
yeah. so so I go see Dr. Roy, and he's like, hey, plugs in. He's like, I want to check something. He's like, all right, he's checking this. He's like, I think that you have a tooth infection right here. And I'm
What?
like, well, why is that? And he's like, well, if I measure this point on the ear and I measure to here, he's like, there's zero conductivity. Like, it's passing straight through. There should be some resistance.
There's so
He's like,
much with
I've
the
seen
mouth.
this over and over again, right? I fly home. That's like on a Thursday. Saturday rolls by. All of a sudden, wow, okay, I've got a massive like
Oh,
throbbing and so I go in to an emergency dentist on Sunday, and they run x-rays. I have the tech looks at it, the primary dentist looks at it, and they're both like, it looks just like a peripheral infection. Here's some antibiotics, but we don't see anything on the imaging. Okay. So that's two
uh-huh.
people that looked at it. I'm on antibiotics for 2 weeks. I come off and my elbow starts hurting, I'm like, that's not a good sign because the infection so I went to go see my dentist. My dentist, they run the imaging. Their tech looks at it, says, this looks completely fine. There's nothing going on here. My dentist comes in and look at it. It's the fourth look now. And he goes, it looks fine, but there's just this hair of a speck on this tooth that we did this root canal on you like 3 months ago. It's like, it's so faint. I don't see anything. I want you to go see an oral surgeon. So I go to the oral surgeon. The oral surgeon looks at the imaging, says, I don't see anything, but let's do the sensitivity and other tests.
CD or
She does that. And she's like, you know what? I think we've got an infection. we caught this so early in this process. It's crazy. Mind you, this is 5 people looking 3
Yep.
and Roy's like, "Hey, you got a tooth infection right there,"
Has the energy channel.
based off of
I
that,
did a glitch
which
in
is
the
just based off of his research, again, pattern recognition, like, that's
yeah.
developed over thousands of years, like, and yeah, there should be some resistance, just from people going, "Oh, that sounds pretty woo-woo." Like, all right, he's checking a connection 2 different points in the body, you know, we should have resistance. So something is odd if it's passing
Yeah.
all the way through. I'm holding a rod in one hand, we're checking the current on the other, and it's flowing through with 0 ohms, right? So,
Ah,
yeah, yeah. So now back to the PIMF. So what that does with that, so we talked about at the cellular level what it's doing. It's doing something on this mechanical level as well, right? Because that magnetic frequency is taking those microcapillaries and it's pulsing them for every pulse like this, right? So it's stimulating that microcirculation, not via the heart, but the mechanical opening and closing of the microcapillaries, which then your TB, your BPC, your GHK are helping form the new microcapillaries in those areas that we need that in. And this is then helping drive that nutrient delivery and the waste process, the waste removal process
mm,
within that. And then at the mitochondrial level, helping improve that mitochondrial function. So
fascinating.
PIMP, and then, like I said, if you look at what happens from what it does to the osteoblast, and I started mentioning the welding process, and we got off track,
Right.
but it's literally it's a piezoelectric charge that causes that osteoblast formation, and it's drawn to it. These two charge, it's exactly like bone repair is a welding process. It is
Wow.
exactly the same process. Yes, the piezoelectric charge, like your barbecue lighter, the little click, 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 is exactly what's happening at that. And so one of the stimuluses for this is like why walking and stuff helps, and load, like not
Yeah.
having load on your body has that effect because it's a bending moment. So it's that compression causes that bone to bend just a little bit like this at a micro level. That bending, boom, 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 creates that piezoelectric charge, which then drives
Well,
the osteoblast formation.
okay, because I gotta ask you about this because, women walking with vests is big. I've heard a lot about how having that extra weight on the bones actually creates them to work, which is what reduces osteoporosis, bone density loss, et cetera, as we age. So that's what you're describing here then. So walking with a weighted
But it's
vest.
the impact of the steps on the walking though too. Like that's the
Yeah.
that's the
Yeah.
driver. That's it, boom, boom,
Got
boom.
it.
Every one of those
Okay.
steps, and then when you have the load, that's driving that process, which then
Okay,
counters.
I'm never chinsing out on my vest ever again then, because there's some days where I'm like, I don't wanna feel sweaty, I'm not gonna do it." I mean,
So
because it gets sweaty underneath and it's kinda like, "Ugh," but yeah, okay, I'm walking with my vest every day then. So I see it's the hammer effect that creates the pressure and
yeah,
then actually re-welding, you're saying. It's actually strengthening the
yep.
bone. Wow.
Exactly, which
Grandma
is causing
knew.
those osteoblasts, boom, 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 and that's why. Do you know why PIMF was created?
No. No idea.
It was developed by NASA for astronauts in space because of the bone loss.
Here we go again with NASA. This is so hysterical. That's the
Yes,
same thing
I
the
had
guy sold me on the red light.
back in the yes, I completely forgot about that as we started talking about this because I'm like,
Yeah.
the other thing, PIMF is really great for, well,
Yeah.
that was why, actually, yeah, I've got an article on my site, space
Evidently,
science.
sending astronauts into space
But
is really
that
helpful.
was to stimulate that process that happens when we no longer have that gravity on the body creating, because that's what
Mm,
happens when you're in space. Like you're free floating, there's
got
no
it.
load on those bones, and that process stops, right? So
Oh, I had to tell you something else. This is just for my women listeners in particular, although I know men have it too. But so I also read that by cleaning the fascia, like loosening these adhesions, you reduce cellulite as well, because cellulite is simply just a rubber band effect of the fat in the muscle, etc., pulling down to create the dimple look on the skin. Is that true?
I'd have to dig into that a little bit, but conceptually, it makes a lot of sense. So
Right?
that fascia needs to be, the
Worked.
fascia is so interesting on so many, but yes, it needs to be gliding and
Yes.
moving, right? And
Otherwise,
so
it's like
it
a
on
rubber
the other,
band.
I mean, it makes perfect sense, right? Because on the other side, when it's not moving, that same thing is happening on the other side, which is
Yeah.
then what starts, creating the restrictions, the lack in movement, or the signals that send the say, keep the body safe, let's not go there, like
Yeah.
because of that lack of fluidity. So when I talked about the chemical releases around an injury, that happens. So that starts happening. It's not actually around an injury. It's actually pre. So this is actually what leads to an injury. All right. So when we move beyond our capacity and our tissue becomes hypoxic, right? Then those chemicals are created around those cells. That creates this lack of fluidity of that membrane to move over itself. And so then that lack of movement starts happening. Then the body's always going to protect nerves. We've got these nerves kind of bound in those networks and stuff. But then that lack of being able to move cleanly and freely, in the following weeks. So maybe it's 4 or 5 weeks later. If we look at, I can't remember his research right now out of Australia, really great sports scientist, but it's typically 4 to 5 weeks after these overtraining effects is when the injury actually, oh, my wrist is hurting or my elbow's hurting, when it was something basically 4 or 5 weeks earlier where we trained beyond percent of our capacity, let's say in a given
And
week,
the
right? And
body's
that
good at
creates this
protecting
hypoxic
itself.
condition, which then creates that movement. Well, that's exactly kind of what it's going to look like on the other side, so you're seeing that
Yeah.
on the skin side as well as this. The other side of that is just the elastin production loss.
Uh-huh.
So
Uh-huh.
elastin starts dropping really significantly around 35, and people think about the collagen, but the elastin actually drops so much faster. And the elastin is not doesn't affect the cellulite, but it affects the skin staying in place and it versus kind of drooping a bit, right?
Right.
GHK-Cu is incredible for elastin production, by the way. That is, I mean, I swear, if you go on the Facebook peptide groups, there's so many that are like 45, 50 plus women. I swear they named the product, which is the TB BPC GHK combo, as glow because it gives you the skin glowing look. I swear that's where the name actually came from.
I love that. Yeah, I was thinking as you were talking, it's kinda like lube, right? It's just lubing
Yeah.
everything. But the body is incredibly good if there's any kind of minor injury at shutting it off and protecting it. I mean, if you broke your leg, you don't wanna continue walking on it. So it's a natural response for the body. But if you think about all the little micro injuries that we have from our sedentary lifestyle, etcetera, I mean, it doesn't take much anymore for weird little kinks and things to happen. And now the body says, ooh, it's kinked up there. I'm just going to protect it. And now that's when we start to see chronic. And it
Yep.
doesn't start as chronic, it starts as something small and inconsequential that you don't think matters.
Yep. And unfortunately, that is a big issue with even some of the messaging that I'm sharing here around loading. Like we talked about load saving you from
Mhm.
osteoarthritis, right? And somebody will go, hear that, I'm all in. And then they're just like, I've started a new exercise routine. I've thrown the vest on. I'm walking 5 miles a day. And did I mention the thing about over 10% of so from a acute loading and chronic loading standpoint. So if we look at what is the average load that you have had over the last 4 to 6 weeks, right? If the load increases by more than 10, 12%, acutely, so there's 1 week over what it's averaged, that's when this stuff starts happening.
Mm.
And so, yeah, best way to not get that kink in your neck is to actually develop all those tissues around the neck, the shoulder, everything, but not too fast, right? You want to add about roughly 10% of what your average load is, not exceed that in any given week, right? And so we want
I
to
always
build tolerance slowly. Like this
This is
is
what I tell my clients. I say, we're just trying to move the needle a little bit. We don't need to peg the other side. Like, slow down,
and
son.
which is going to create this boom bounce back thing all the time. If you want to be at this for the long road, being super intense for 6 months, do you really need to do that if you're going to be training for 20 years? Like, are you going to be able to sustain that level of intensity? You've got to build into it. I'm a big proponent of minimalist shoes. I've got the brand Barefoot, Bear. That's a big area that people go wrong with that as well. And they create
Yep.
edema situations of the bone, like and stuff going on where that load is actually going to help increase, But if they go, I'm a runner and I'm just going to switch over and run 20 miles a day on this, like, guess what? Your feet are weak. They haven't been trained. So you need to think
I'm
about an untrained body part. What are we going to do? Let's increase. So maybe spend 10% of your time in a minimalist shoe for the week, right?
I'm the fruitcake in the neighborhood that's walking to the mailbox barefoot. Everyone's looking at me. I'm like, I don't care. My feet are stronger than your feet. So there's that. You know? Yeah,
And that
we're working
is
for sure.
so, yeah. And so people ask me about, like, well, what's the perfect program? How many hours? What should I do? And it's just like, well, I don't have the perfect training program like anything else. Like, if you've done it and you feel like you can handle more, increase it. If you've, you know, if you're sore or a little too sore beyond, like, back that off a little bit. You're going to respond a little different. Everybody's got a different baseline. Like, if you walked into the gym day one and did, 20 reps, 50 reps of squats with plates on the bar, you're going to kill yourself. There's
Yeah.
a few outliers that would be able to survive that, right?
Yeah.
And then everybody's going to respond different each week. So there's just don't spike it too much. And then anytime to increase your chronic load, so that's your average. Chronic is a fancy word for average, right? Having a spike 1 week doesn't have to be all the time. I don't have to ramp everything up. But if I take 1 week and bring that up, my average over the last 4 to 6 weeks just went up, right? And then I'm going to boom, lever that, and then boom, another one. And you just every now and again keep doing that and bringing that up. And that's going to
Intuitive
help.
listening too. I feel like just like pushing a little bit more than like listen to your body and then go just a little bit further, because your body's going to resist. And then if you just push past that resistance a little bit, I think that's kind of the key.
Yes. And I'll take that a little bit further. If you haven't trained, if you haven't pushed yourself physically, you don't know what you're capable of and you don't know what hard is. Because you're going to go in there and you're like, this is hard. Squats suck. This is horrible. I can't do anymore. And if somebody pushed you, you'd find out that you have a lot more in you. So a lot of people train way under capacity and go, I don't get any results from training because
Mhm.
they've never trained hard and they don't know that they're not training hard because they've never explored those limits. And they're chronically, thinking that they're doing something that is training hard and should net results or not seeing the results, but they've just never experienced what hard is. So you can frame that. You should be able to gauge it. Let's say a 1 to 10. Like 10 means absolutely. There's actually it's an rate of perceived effort is and Mike Toucher popularized this. So I don't know, like 25 years ago, but it's based out of the medical literature on the pain scale. But 10 means I cannot push a single ounce, like everything's in it. If you've got a 9, it means, I stopped at 8 reps, but I probably could have got 9 reps. Like, right. And so it's like, you're backing that down. Right. And how are you going to train at a 7 or 8 if you don't know what a 10 is? You're going to think you're there, but you're actually at a 4. Like,
Right.
and that's why a lot of people don't get results.
Yep.
They're never pushing up that chronic load to a level that's developing really any true meaning. I mean, it's providing
Totally.
meaning. Don't get me wrong, but
I
and then the other side of it is that, yeah, don't do it too fast, too hard, and then just
hard,
overhurt
right.
yourself.
Right.
You may
And then
not
you're
actually pushed it
backwards.
hard, but your body has no tolerance whatsoever, and you just went right here. And
I used to have a little mini farm and I would carry the chicken feed and I would carry the dirt and I would carry all these things. And I was surprised at how quickly I lost it when I wasn't doing that all the time. And so now I'm like, dang, I got to get that back. It used to be nothing to chuck 50 pounds of feed over my shoulder and go. And so I'm working on it. But it is the other part of that is you'll lose it. Use it or lose it.
yeah,
You know,
you,
I think that's important too.
that is the message for your body,
Use it or lose it.
right?
Yeah.
Use it or lose it. Yep.
Absolutely. Hey, listen, I'm so glad that we were able to reschedule and get you back on to talk about this because I feel like this was just such a comprehensive conversation about all those things. Where can the listeners find you, Chris? And always, we do include it in the show notes, but where's the best place for them to check you out?
Enhancedexecutive.com, or you can just type in chrisduffin.com
Yeah, you
and
come up.
it'll redirect to that. It's like muffin, but Duffin. And that's basically how you can find me in any social media platform. I'm occasionally on Instagram these days. Most of everything that I'm doing, I'm really focusing on YouTube right now.
It's funny you say.
You can find me under Mad Scientist Duffin, but if you just type Chris Duffin, I'm pretty easy to find because I've done a lot of things in the course of my life. So you type that into any platform engine, I'll be the first thing that does pop up,
It
as long
comes
as you
up.
put the D
Yeah.
in front of the, Duffin.
I took a 3-month hiatus from Instagram, went back for the book published stuff, and I don't miss it. Didn't miss it. I find a lot more beneficial resources on YouTube, and that's kind of the direction I'm pivoting. I'm starting from scratch there, but I think it's worth it in the long run.
Yeah, I'm totally so I've got 350,000 like followers on Instagram, and I'm just not even using it anymore because I just can't do any depth of
Yeah.
discourse on Instagram. And
Yep.
it's just, even though I've got a massive follower base, it'd be a great marketing potential. I'm just moving away from that. Now, in the
Yep.
last little bit, when I record a YouTube video, I try to do a 3-minute like short version to tell people
Yep.
about it. So I might drop like that once or twice a month on there. And then I'm going back to my YouTube, which is I abandoned really not quite 10 years ago. So I'm bringing that back up. One of my
Singing.
companies had it as an educational service, and they
Yep.
kind of killed it during that time. So now it's like getting that momentum
Yep.
rolling in. But I'm certainly not starting from scratch. So I'm hoping in the next few months I can break 100,000 subscribers on
Nice.
YouTube. So that'll be good.
I just
So
never did a darn thing with YouTube except be an observer. So I'm excited to kind of pivot that direction because like you, the content that I'm sharing is it's complex and deep and Instagram just doesn't allow for that. So it's kind of nice to,
yeah,
be spending some time in a new platform too where I feel like there's also less trolls. So there's that
yes.
too. Yeah.
Yeah. No,
Well,
I
thank you
love
so
just being
much.
able to sit there and talk in depth about something and like not worry about like I got to cut this word, just like getting it just so I can just get it condensed down. And
Yep.
it's actually easier to do a 15 or 20-minute video than it is to do a 90-second video.
It's freeing, isn't it?
Yes, it is.
Well, thank you so much for coming on. And I love this conversation. I'm sure it won't be the last, and I'll see you soon.
All right, you have a good one.
I am really excited to share something that has honestly been such a game changer for me during a time when I truly needed some extra support. I've been feeling the weight of stress and life, and I could see it showing up in my overall health and well being. For the past few weeks, I've been using bioactive peptides, and holy buckets, guys, I have improved mental clarity, focus, and I'm finally getting some more restful sleep. If you've been struggling with brain fog, low energy, skin health, and that last little bit of weight, or getting really good sleep, this might be worth looking into. And of course, I don't add products to my health and wellness routine without doing significant research. When I saw what Make Wellness was doing and their evidence backed science, I had to give it a try. I also followed it up with my own personal mini case study using dry blood analysis, and the proof was in the pudding. I have now partnered with Make Wellness to bring you their bioactive peptide products with a special SkyTalk Doc promo code that you can find in the show notes. As always, consult with your provider before making medical decisions. This should not replace medical advice. The views expressed in this podcast aren't necessarily those of the Sky Talk Doc. They're here to challenge your thinking and inspire growth. Until next time, blue skies and tailwinds.